started. I am Becky Reback. I am the head of parent and family coaching at Evolved Education Company. And I follow the collaborative and proactive solutions model in my parent and family coaching. If you're new to the model, welcome. I'm going to give a little background of it tonight before we get into the details of problem solving. And if you're you know the model or you've been along these webinar journeys with me, then I'm happy to have you back. And you'll have a little bit of review again before we jump into problem solving. So this is collaborative and proactive solutions, and this is the problem solving conversation. So what is CPS? CPS, collaborative and proactive solutions, is non-punitive, non-adversarial, research-based approach to problem solving. The idea behind in CPS is that challenging behaviors in our children occur when the expectation placed on them is greater than their ability to meet that expectation and respond adaptively. So in CPS, we are using a problem-solving partnership to collaborate with our kids on and to help them solve the problems that are affecting his or her or their lives. So in CPS, we want to move away from solving disagreements with conflict and move toward solving disagreements with a conversation affectionately called Plan B, which is what I'm going to speak about tonight. We really want to focus on we really want to stop focusing on modifying behaviors and start focusing on solving problems. And that's what I'm going to teach you tonight, is how to use this specific type of conversation to have a collaborative problem-solving conversation with your child. So the way that this all starts out is we use this tool called the assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problem. This is a picture of it over here on the right. And this is the tool that we use to help us be proactive in our problem solving conversations. So we make a list of our unsolved problems based on some of the lagging skills that we might check off. And we can identify patterns of challenging or concerning behavior in our kids. Once we've identified patterns, we can then proactively have a conversation because we know when challenging moments are going to happen. If they have, for example, from the list, it says difficulty handling transition, shifting from one mindset or task to another. Maybe we know that transitioning into school is really challenging for them. We're going to put all the transitions that are difficult surrounding school on our unsolved problem list. So in this assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problem meeting, again, it's going to be our tool to be proactive, to have our problem solving conversation. And this is where we are identifying our children's lagging skills and unsolved problems. So just a disclaimer, if you were here with me for the webinar about the assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems a couple of weeks ago, I said this then. I think it's relevant to say it again now. As a caregiver, and I like this because it actually kind of takes the pressure off of caregivers. So as a caregiver, it's not your job to know, right? It's not our job to know every single thing that's going on with our kid, but it is our job to find out. So we can make our list of lagging skills and unsolved problems, and then we have to find out from the kid themselves what's coming up for them when they're having difficulty meeting an expectation, a clearly defined expectation that we've set out. And that's exactly what our Plan B conversation is going to do. It's going to help us find out, because the kid is our best source of information because they know themselves the best. So let's dig into the Plan B meeting. This is our problem solving conversation. So solutions that are arrived at via Plan B are collaborative and and informed, excuse me. They're informed, they're collaborative and informed. Collaborative meaning the adult is partnering with the kid to have a problem-solving conversation. And informed means the adult is gathering information from the kid about what's making it difficult for them to meet the expectation that was set up for them. Problem solving is a partnership. So it's something that the adults are doing with the kids rather than to the kids. And it engages the child. Again, I said this earlier, but it engages the child in solving the problems that are affecting his or her life. So everybody who's here probably has something on their list that they want to talk to their kid about, some unmet expectation. And maybe we've done what we typically call a plan A, where we impose an adult solution. So that might look like, I notice you're having difficulty getting dressed for school in the morning. So I've decided I'm going to pick out your clothes the night before for you, right? That would be a plan A. We have no idea why the kid is having trouble picking out their clothes, getting dressed for school in the mornings, but we just think it's hard for them to pick out their clothes. So we're just going to take that on and do it for them. I'm sure all of us have been there and done that. I do that with my own daughter all the time, even though I live and preach this. So I'm just a human like you. But what we want to do is actually engage our kids in that conversation. Hey, I noticed it was difficult for you to get dressed for school. What's up? And then we're going to ask some questions about it. Plan B involves 3 steps: the empathy step, the define adult concern step, and the invitation step. I'm going to walk through the 3 steps. So you'll get an in-depth look, and then I'm going to highlight a couple of the drilling strategies that we use in the empathy step to gather information from the kids. I do want to note that some common misconception about Plan B and CPS is that the adult is just giving in to the kid what they want. So they're letting the child choose the solution, even if it's not going to work for them. And I'm going to talk about in the them meaning the adult. In the invitation step, I'm going to talk about how we evaluate solutions to make sure that it works for the child and the adult. So remember, this is collaborative. So parents are not just giving in or giving up what they feel they need in the situation. So I really want to make sure that that's very clear, that everybody gets a little bit of something in this collaborative problem-solving approach. So the first step is the empathy step. The empathy step involves gathering information from your child about his or her perspective, her point of view, her concerns about any given unsolved problem. Now, remember, we have a list of specific unsolved problems from our ALSA, our assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems. So we know exactly what problems we want to solve. And usually that list has at least 5, 6, 7, sometimes 30, 40, depending on what's going on in your family, different things that we're going to prioritize. So in this empathy step, we're starting off by just letting the kids share their perspective and their point of view. And all we're doing here is trying to gain the clearest possible understanding of their concern. We're using very specific language and very specific drilling strategies just to learn about their concerns. So our goal here is to make sure we have a deep understanding of what they think is coming up for them to any given unsolved problem or unmet expectation. So the empathy step starts with a very specific phrase, I've noticed that, and then you insert your unsolved problem, and then you end with what's up. So for example, it might say, hey, Sally, I've noticed you're having difficulty making your bed before breakfast in the morning. What's up? That could be an example of an unsolved problem. A school-based unsolved problem might be, hey, Sally, I noticed you're having difficulty completing your double-digit math worksheet. What's up? Right? So I'm being very specific in my phrasing of my unsolved problem, because that really gives our kids the opportunity to go into the correct file in their brain and pull out the information that's coming up for them in that moment. If we're really general, like, hey, I noticed you're having difficulty getting started, getting dressed in the morning, that's really vague, right? What does getting started mean? What do we mean by getting dressed? Do we mean about picking out our clothes? Do we mean, putting on our shoes before we leave the house, right? There's so many steps to getting dressed. Let's break that down. We want to be as specific as possible. If anybody out there has a student or a child that has any type of language-based learning disability, I did this at a school for kids with language-based learning disabilities. And one beauty of it is that because you're so specific in your language, it really helps them to pull out, again, the information that they have. So when you're writing your unsolved problems, you want to be as specific as possible, because that's going to yield a really good plan B conversation. So in the empathy step, again, we're trying to gather information. I'm going to talk about the drilling strategies now, and that's all part of the empathy step. And then we'll move on to the define adult concern step, and finally the invitation step. If anybody at any point has questions, feel free to chat them, and I'll look at them, and I'm always happy to answer your questions. Or if you have an unsolved problem that you want to kind of talk about back and forth, I'm happy to answer any questions. So definitely don't hesitate to put anything in the Q&A box, and I'll answer them as best I can. So again, our empathy step, we're gathering information from the kid. We're not inserting our adult theories into this. We're leaving our adult theories at the door. We are not inserting behavior, right? So you're not going to say, hey, Sally, I notice you stomp your feet and throw your pillows when it's time to make your bed before breakfast, right? We're just leaving all the behavior out of it. We're being really objective, and we're only stating what the expectation is. The expectation is that Sally makes her bed before breakfast, and that's what our unmet expectation is, and that's what our unsolved problem is. So in the empathy step, there are 6 drilling strategies that we can use. I think 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 drilling strategies that we can use to gather information from the kids. I've bolded the most common ones and your kind of default ones, and I'm going to talk about those and give examples for those tonight. But know that every drilling strategy has its place in a plan B conversation. It really just depends on the way that your conversation is going. So the first most common and biggest default strategy is going to be reflective listening. And quite honestly, I started practicing this in many places in my life, and it has yielded to much better situations and solutions than just kind of talking over somebody. So maybe in your life in general, we can all start practicing some reflective listening. So reflective listening is exactly what it sounds like. You're reflecting back on what the kid has said, and then you're going to ask for more information. So you're mirroring and asking for more. So it might sound something like this. If we're thinking about our example of difficulty making the bed in the morning before breakfast, maybe Sally said to you, she doesn't know where to start. Like, she doesn't know to pull up the duvet first. Maybe she has a top sheet. Maybe there's extra pillows, right? She doesn't know where to start. So you're reflectively listening and then asking for more. So you might say, I hear you saying you don't know what part of the bed you should make first. Tell me more about that. It's as simple as that. Other phrases you might use in reflective listening to gain more information is, how so? Can you explain that to me? Right? So we're just saying back what they said and then asking for more information. I almost always start with reflective listening. I bet you a lot of you are thinking, well, what if I pose my unsolved problem and my kid says, I don't know. Reflectively listen. I don't know. You said you don't know. Tell me more about that. Can you explain that? What don't you know? Right? So you asking that type, right? So you're kind of taking the pressure off them a little bit just by restating what they said and asking for more information. The next drilling strategy I'm going to talk about are the W questions, or the WH questions, the who, what, when, and where questions. We're going to stay away from why. There's a couple of reasons why we're staying away from why questions. One, and I think is the biggest reason, is because most of the time when you ask why, your kid's either going to tell you what they think you want to hear or what they've been trained to say, right? What they've kind of been conditioned to say. And also, most of the kids don't know why they're having difficulty meeting an expectation, right? So we're going to stay away from why. Also, why is actually answered for us. The lagging skill that we have already assessed on our assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems, the why is the lagging skill. Why are they having difficulty meeting an expectation? Because they're lagging a skill in this area, right? So we're going to do our very, very best not to ask why questions. We're going to ask those really objective and explicit questions: who, what, when, where. So if the example of making the bed, we might say, what goes on your bed? Where do you keep your extra pillows? Right? And again, you're probably thinking, well, I'm their parent, I know all this information. But sometimes if a kid starts off and doesn't quite know what to say, or they're nervous because this might be one of the first couple of times that you're having a collaborative conversation with them, asking those really simple questions, those W questions, is going to just get the kid talking. And that's really our overarching goal here, is to get our kids talking and telling us what's coming up for them to any unmet expectation. So those W questions are a great place to start if you have a kid that says, I don't know, or sits there in silence for a few minutes after you've posed the unsolved problem. Ask your basic W questions, because you just want to get the conversation flowing. And then usually after you've gotten a couple of basic answers, they start to open up more and they start to kind of trust the process. The final drilling strategy that I'm going to talk about is summarizing. Again, all the other strategies have a wonderful place and are super, super important. And I'm happy to spend some time talking to you guys more about them. If you need, you can always reach out to me. But I'm going to talk about summarizing, because summarizing is really a really important strategy. You use summarizing throughout the conversation. Usually what happens is you pose your unsolved problem, you get a couple of different concerns, and you drill down on those concerns. You ask how not knowing where to start making the bed gets in their way from making the bed, right? You're always relating it back to the unsolved problem. And then after you've gotten a couple concerns, you summarize. So you might say, let me make sure I understand this correctly. You don't know which place to start. There are so many extra pillows, and you hate having to pull up the top sheet, right? I don't even sleep with the top sheet on my bed because I hate it so much. So, right. So you might say, I'm going to say that again, just because I digress a little bit. You say, let me make sure I understand this. This is summarizing. Let me make sure I understand this all correctly. You don't know where to start. You have so many extra pillows and you hate pulling up the top sheet. Is there anything else getting in the way of making your bed before breakfast in the morning? Before breakfast in the morning. Okay. So you're summarizing what they said and then seeing if there's any other concerns. If there are no more concerns, that's when you have come to the end of the empathy step. So if you, at the end of the empathy step, you summarize, you ask for no more concerns, they say there's no more concerns. I always like to take a minute and think about all the information I've gotten and make sure I fully understand each concern that the kid has brought up. Usually there's 3 to 4 that a kid has brought up. 2, 3, 4, something like that. If I feel like I have a clear understanding, and it's not that the kid thinks I have a clear understanding, it's that I think I have a clear understanding of all their concerns, then I have the child prioritize their number one concern. So I would say, okay, you told me again that you don't know where to start. There's so many extra pillows and you hate having to pull up the top sheet. Which concern is getting in your way the most of making the bed before breakfast in the morning? So you want them to prioritize, because we can only come up with a solution for really one concern, right? Sometimes concerns can be related and then you can kind of mush them together, but generally you're going to have them prioritize and come up with just the tip top concern for them. So let's say that they don't know where to start. Okay, that's the concern that they think about, that they think is getting in their way the most. After you've completed that, then it's time for the define adult concern step. This is where the adults get to talk. And sorry, adults, it's not a lengthy description. It's actually super short. The define adult concern step is like, I don't know, 3 minutes tops, maybe 2. And this is where your concerns get entered into consideration. Your adult concern should fall into one or both of the following categories. So it should be how the unsolved problem is affecting the kid themselves, or how the unsolved problem is affecting other people. Okay, so an example of the making the bed, the adult concern might be that with all the extra pillows on the floor, it's really hard to walk out of the room and they're tripping a lot and they're going to hurt themselves. So, and I'm going to model how we phrase the adult concern in just a minute. So our adult concern is always free of behavior and free of the unsolved problem. So this is where brevity is your friend. You don't need to go into a whole lengthy conversation about your concern. You're starting with specific language. You're starting with either saying my concern is or the thing is. That's it. Personally, I like the thing is, it just rolls off my tongue better, but it really doesn't matter which one you use as long as you're saying one of those phrases, my concern is, or the thing is, and then just what your concern is. So you're not inserting any extra behavior. You're not over explaining. So it sounds like this. The thing is, there's so many extra pillows on the ground and you're tripping and hurting yourself on your way to the bathroom or on your way to breakfast. That's it. That's all I'm saying, right? The thing is, there's so many extra pillows on the ground and you're tripping and hurting yourself on your way to breakfast. That's all that we need to say in the adult concern. You're just stating your concern. Remember, we don't want to overwhelm our kids with language. That's when they shut down. Right. So a lot of us are probably here because we're used to lecturing our kids and they're not listening. It's in one ear and out the other. I promise. We've all probably done that too. The significant others or our parents when we were kids. And so you want to just keep it short. So you make sure they're actually listening to your concern. The kid does not have to agree with your concern. They don't have to like your concern, but they do have to accept that it's your concern, right? Because this is a collaboration. So you heard all of their concerns. Now it's their turn to hear all of your concerns. And you do have to make sure they understand it, right? So you just want to say, do you understand my concern? Do you have any questions about my concern? They're probably going to say no because they don't want to talk about your concern, and that's just fine. Just make sure that they fully understand what your concern is. If you as the adult have more than one concern, totally fine. You can state them. Just like we did with the kid, you as the adult will prioritize what your number one concern is before we move into the invitation step. So we had the empathy step, the define adult concern step, and now we're moving into the invitation step. So the invitation step here, the goal is to collaborate on solutions with our child. The way we collaborate and evaluate solutions are based on two criteria. They're based on the fact of them being realistic. The solution has to be realistic and it has to be mutually satisfactory. And I say these words to the kids, even my youngest kids. I might say, if they're younger, I might say, I'm going to give you a really fancy word. We're going to talk about what they mean, right? So even before you get into the invitation step, you could say, now we're moving into the invitation step of our conversation. This is where we're going to think of solutions together. We have to make sure that our solutions are realistic, meaning both of us can do them. We both can follow through and kind of uphold our end of the bargain, and mutually satisfactory, meaning they address the kid's concern and they address your concern. So remember way back in the beginning, I said, you're not giving up your concerns. You still get your concerns to be addressed. And this is where that's happening in the invitation step. So realistic and mutually satisfactory. The child has the first opportunity to come up with a solution. And we, again, shock of all shocks, phrase it in a very specific way. So it sounds like this. Sally, I wonder if there's a way that we can come up with a solution that addresses your concern of not knowing which part to start with when you're making the bed, and my concern of keeping your body safe so you don't trip over the extra pillows. And that's all you need to say. And then the kid comes up with a possible solution, okay? Always give the kid the first opportunity to come up with a solution. If they really cannot come up with something, you can suggest something, but give them a chance. Like, be okay with silence for a few minutes. I would say 9 times out of 10 when I've done this with the child, no matter how old the kid is, they say, I don't know. And I say, that's okay. I'm not in a rush. I'm here. I'm waiting for it, right? So let your kid have an opportunity to think. When you get a solution, whether it's one that your kid has suggested or that you have thought of, you only evaluate one solution at a time. So you're not picking from a menu. So you think of one solution and then evaluate it based on it being realistic and mutually satisfactory. If it is realistic and mutually satisfactory, great. You agree, you recap it, and you're done. If it's not realistic and mutually satisfactory, like one of you can't uphold your end of the bargain and one of you feels like it doesn't address both of your concerns, then you move on to the next possible solution, right? So an example, the kid maybe says, well, maybe you can make me a chart so I can see the steps to make my bed, right? That addresses their concern of not knowing what step to start with, and your concern of not tripping over the pillows, because if they make their bed, their pillows won't be on the ground. And that is our plan B at the end. Once you come up with a solution, you put it in place, give it a couple of days, a week maybe, to make sure that it's working. If it is working, amazing. If it's not working, that's okay too. I would say most of the time solutions don't work the first time, and you come back and you say, thank you so much for that amazing conversation. We just need to tweak this solution a little bit. This part's working and this part's not working, right? And so you kind of have another mini conversation about the solution. And then after that, if their solution's working, you move on to your next plan B conversation. So just to recap, the plan B conversation has 3 steps. It has the empathy step. It had where you gather information from the kid and use our drilling strategies. Drilling is not grilling, just asking questions to find out and have the clearest possible understanding of their concerns. The define adult concern step, where your concern gets entered into consideration. And then the invitation step, where you collaborate with your child to come up with a solution that addresses both of your concerns. And that's our talk for tonight. Unless anybody has any questions for me, which I'm more than happy to answer. I'm just looking in the Q&A box. No questions yet, but that's totally fine. If you would like more information, or you want clarity on something, or you're interested in working with my parent and family coaching consultation services, you can email me at becky@evolveded.com. I also have a course, which I'm happy to send you the link for you to sign up to, that gives you an overview of the CPS model. And it's essentially the first session that you might do with me. It's just at a lower rate because it's a course and you don't have the one-to-one time with me. So I am happy to provide any more information on anything that you might need. I do hope that you guys got some strategies and some tools to have collaborative conversations with your kids tonight. And I'm here, I'll hang out for another minute or two to see if anybody has any questions. And thank you all for joining me. I really appreciate it on your Thursday night. Any questions out there? Here we go. Okay, thanks, Ellen. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming. Why won't it let me open the Q&A? Hold on, let me stop my share. Here we go. How frequently would you recommend we have these conversations? When is too much for the child? That's a really great question. I would say that CPS is a rolling process. So you're only going to solve one problem at a time. So we just can't focus on more than one problem at a time. It's not realistic for any of us. So I would say about once a week, you're probably having a plan B conversation. Again, like once you have a solution that's working, it's a rolling process. So we move on to the next plan B conversation. You don't want to be stuck in one plan B for too long. Usually you find a solution or you tweak the solution and then you move on so you can continue to solve all the problems that are on your unsolved problems list. I would say if you're doing it about once a week, it's not too much for the kid. If you think it might be too much for your kid, then what I recommend is booking a time with them and saying, hey, I want to have a problem solving conversation with you. When's a good time for you to speak? Then they have a little bit more buy-in into the process, and they probably are more willing to talk to you about it. And I also think once the kid feels comfortable in the Plan B conversation and this collaborative problem solving conversation, they're more willing to talk about it because they trust that you're going to follow up and kind of uphold your end of the bargain too with the solution that they come up with. So I find the more that you have them, actually, the more it becomes less of a thing and it becomes more natural with the whole family. The language becomes more natural and it just kind of becomes your natural way of solving problems. Thank you for that question, Lindsay. Thanks, Francis. I appreciate you coming. Any other questions? Okay, well, it is 8:30, and if there are no more questions, I am going to end it for tonight. Thank you all so much for coming again. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to do a complimentary 15-minute phone conversation. If you have follow-up questions or just want to get to know me better, or want to get to know the model better, I just want to help people. So definitely don't hesitate to reach out. And thank you all, and I'll see you soon. Thanks. Bye.